All right, we are starting Level I, Unit 1, Week 1, Lesson 1. So here we're going to be talking about a couple of different things here. We're going to be talking about the word integer, we're going to talk about rational number, we're going to talk about fraction, and we're going to talk about positive and negative, okay? We are also going to see some decimals. Okay, so I assume we all know what a fraction is. Okay, we have a whole number over each other. Sometimes the number on top, which is the numerator, is bigger than the number on the bottom, which is the denominator. So, but we know how to identify a fraction. Okay, we know how to identify a decimal. Obviously, a decimal is going to have a decimal point. An integer, though, is any whole number or its opposite. So, and the word positive and the word negative, those are opposites. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of highlight these words here because I'm going to be using these words a lot. So we need to know positive and negative are opposites. We need to know how to identify a fraction and how to identify a decimal and an integer. And like I said, an integer is any whole number or its opposite. A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction in which both the numerator and the denominator are integers. So if you look at this fraction, the numerator and the denominator are both whole numbers, so they are both integers. Rational numbers can be whole numbers, integers, fractions, or decimals. So a rational number can be one of three things: a whole number, an integer, fraction, or decimal. All right, and remember, an integer is a whole number. So let's take a look at the try this. It says change each positive rational number by rewriting it as a negative rational number. So here we're going to work on opposites. So number one, if I have a positive 5, this is going to be a negative 5. If I have a positive 1.2, this is going to turn into a negative 1.2. If I have a positive 3/4, this is going to be a negative 3/4. If I have a positive 8/5, this is going to be a negative 8/5. So if there's no sign in front of the number, in front of the fraction or the decimal, that means it's a positive number. And then next, we are going to change each negative rational number by rewriting it as a positive number, positive rational number. So we know it's negative when there's a negative sign in front of it. So now we're going to do the opposite of a negative 10. So the opposite of a negative 10 is going to be a positive 10. And a positive sign is just a plus sign. You can write a positive sign in there, but you do not have to. Number 6, a negative 2/7 is going to be a positive 2/7. Negative 4.1 turns into a positive 4.1. And negative 13/9 turns into positive 13/9. So again, positive and negatives are opposites. On the practice, they want us to write an integer, fraction, and decimal using each set of numbers and symbols provided. Use a negative sign as part of the number, not as an operation. And then we're going to use a 0 placeholder in the ones place for decimal numbers less than 1. Okay, so you're like, what in the heck does that mean? Well, we're just going to take these numbers here and we're going to play with them. We're going to make them into an integer, we're going to make them into a fraction, and we're going to make them into a decimal, okay? And all of these that we make are going to be positive because there's a positive sign right there, okay? So let's do our integer first. Remember, our integer is our whole number. So this could be 43. This could be 34. There's my two integers. For a fraction, this can be a positive 3/4 fourths, or this can be a positive 4/3. For my decimal, this can be a positive 0.34. This could be a positive 0.43. Okay, so here's my integers, here's my fraction, here's my decimal, and they are all positive because that's what the sign said. Now, for your decimals, you could also do a positive 3.4 or 4.3. I would also accept that too. Okay, now let's take a look at one with a negative sign. Let's just take a look at number 10. This one has a negative sign, so now my answers are going to have a negative sign in it. Okay, so let's start with our integer. This could be a negative 61, or this could be a negative 16. There's my integers. For my fraction, this could be a negative 1/6 or a negative 6/1. For my decimals, this could be negative 1.6 or negative 6.1. You could also do what we did on number 9 and put in a 0. So this could also be 0.16 with a negative or negative 0.61. Okay, so here's my integer, here's my fraction, here's my decimal. All right, let's take a look at number 13. It says identify each rational number as negative or positive, and then identify each number as an integer, a fraction, or a decimal. On your slides, I just have you dragging the answer over so you don't have to type anything out. But for example, number 13, positive 5. So this would be an integer, and it's positive. So it has two answers. So you're going to tell me on number 14, is that an integer, fraction, or a decimal, and is it positive or negative? All right, so on your practice page, you're going to do exactly what we just did in the book. So on 1 through 4, you're going to write an integer, fraction, and decimal for each set of symbols and numbers provided. And then you're going to use the negative sign or the positive sign that it tells you to. Okay, so I will do, let's do different. I'll do number 3 with you. So on number 3, there is a negative sign there. So all of my answers are going to be negative. I'm going to start with my integer. So this can be a negative 1.5. My decimal point should not be hanging out in the middle there. Decimal points should be like right there. Yeah. So this is negative 1.5. The other way to write this would be negative 5.1. And yes, you have to have both ways written. My fraction would be negative 1/5 or negative 5/1. My decimal is going to be negative 1.5 or negative 5.1. So you're taking the numbers they give you, you're writing an integer, a fraction, and a decimal. And each example should have 2. On 5 through 12, you're going to do what we did also in the book. You're going to identify each number as positive or negative. So that's what you're going to do first. So on number 5, I know that this is negative because there's a negative symbol. Okay, so I did the first direction. Let's see what the next direction says. It says, then identify each number as an integer, a fraction, or a decimal. Well, a negative 7, this is a whole number, So a whole number, remember, is an integer. If you're confused by that, we know this is not a fraction and we know this is not a decimal. So it's an integer. Okay? Now, number 6, first thing, is it positive or negative? Well, there's no negative sign, so this is positive. And I know that this is a fraction. So you're going to have 2 answers on 5 through 12.